Well, on today's show, we chatted to James Rhino Thomas, a man who, despite encountering a bombing, several earthquakes, and a fire aboard his flight home, has never encountered any bad surf trip. It seems, Tom.
Yeah, and not even, I think, didn't he say he dislocated his shoulder on like the first wave of a surf trip as well?
At that.
That just tells you everything you need to know about what he's like, though, really, isn't it? That, he's got a lifelong affinity for mishaps, and yet comes out of it smiling all the time. Yeah, great guest. Absolutely stoked just having chatted to him for a while there. We've been all over the world. We've talked about perfect waves, and we've talked about terrible surf trips as well. We've talked about his competitive career and his competitive savvy, his rivalries, and what it's like to have your hero sitting at the end of your bed strumming a guitar in the early hours of a full moon night. To find out who that hero is, keep listening. Here's the show. So we're super stoked for Crest episode 3 to be able to welcome 4 times Welsh Open champ Rhino Thomas to the podcast.
Rhino is going to preside over this week's trip nightmare, as well as reminiscing about the finer things in life and generally chatting all things surf and travel.
A charger in the water and one of the most stoked people I know. Welcome to Crest, Rhino.
So, Rhino, the warmest possible welcome to our podcast. As Tom mentioned, a charger, no doubt, and the eternal Grom, invariably stoked, constantly chatting. I've always enjoyed watching and surfing with Rhino. He's the epitome of a local hero, one of the guys I looked up to as a Grom and still do. So it's great to have you on as one of our first guests. How are you, mate?
Great. Rob, thanks very much. Wow, what an introduction. Stoked to be here and really stoked to be on your new show, and well done. Really listened to the first one and it was sounded fantastic.
Cheers, Bird. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And so far, less novel. Let's remind you who my co-host is. To my left is the man credited with stamping out knife crime in the village of Tythegston, the once dangerous streets and now a welcoming environ, thanks in large part to Tom's belletristic initiative, Writing Not Fighting. The 12-week course takes known gang members and aims to transform them from crooks to columnists, ruffians to reporters, through an intensive writing program. It's Tom Anderson. How are you, Tom?
Nice. Well done, Rob. Yeah. And I am. This is a losing battle. This little whatever we call it, skit off that we're having at the start of these shows, isn't it? Okay, here comes my pathetic attempt then. And to my right, the go-to man for online tutoring in the town of Hossegor, I'm told. En français ou en anglais, Groms? You'll tell your parents your HTUs are coming on no end when really all you're doing is working your way through the canon of hipster surf movies. It's Robert Webster Blythe.
Well, Tom, I'm a bit concerned because I thought you said we couldn't use the podcast to promote our own goods and services.
Fair point. Well, you keep mentioning my rather modest writing career in my intros, available from Amazon and most good bookshops. So I thought I'd...
Yeah, that's crossing the line, mate. But I suppose you do need all the help you can get with those sales, eh?
No, I'm linking themes. See, it's what writers do. I'm setting up. It's a sales pitch because that's Rhino's thing, isn't it? See, like, to see the what I was doing there was coming into like marketing, selling,
on topic.
product knowledge.
I'd probably start with his surfing genius myself. So, hang on. When we have a bash at using this script, shall we? I mean, you do talk enough about how much time you spend writing them, so we may as well use them.
All right, fair enough. Yeah. Rhino Thomas. What can we say by way of introduction? Well, of course, the headline figure when talking about this guy's surfing legacy is the 4 Welsh Open titles he won during the late 90s and into the early noughties. As a 16-year-old Grom, I can vividly recall the sight of this guy free falling off a backhand floater to lock in the first title of that winning run. As a surfer, Rhino is one of the Welsh guys to really step up in heavy foreign lineups. Someone with a real appetite for barrels and big drops. Out of the water, he has spent a career in the surf and action sports industry, seeing it change in untold ways, all the while remaining at the top of his game as a consummate professional. We should probably record an entire podcast talking to Rhino about fin foils or other technological advancements in the sport of surfing, and I'm sure it would last, and be just as interesting as talking to him about surfing.
But that would mean missing out on what really makes Rhino Rhino. Among the many interesting conversations I've had with him over the years, one thing that's always been clear is the commitments he's made to living a life around and about the sport of surfing and its lifestyle. Since his teenage years, Rhino has chased waves and sought surf spots. Yes, we all know his stats as a fierce competitor, but where does such an energy and a desire to master your sport come from?
In Rhino's case, the answer is simple. Stoke, and a versatile appetite for it too. This is someone who can get as amped for a Dorney in our local point during a winter storm as he can for a flight south to warmer climes. Contest savvy aside, I know few people who love surf travel as much as today's guest.
Ah, yes, surf travel. I know we offered false promises not to talk about it too wistfully in our previous episodes, but when Rhino is with us, it'd be rude not to tap into a life spent surf tripping. Cold and uncaring, or a tropical idyll, Rhino's appetite for the departure lounge, the road, the foreign breakfast bar, or an ocean sunset on another continent is as strong today as it's ever been, and his stoke for good waves is infectious. All of this why he remains one of the most appreciated surfing personalities in God's country.
How's that for an intro then, Rhines?
Woo-hoo-hoo! Love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we thought we'd try and give you a little bit of welly. That question there that Rob asked back there, perhaps if we start with that, where does that energy and the desire to master your sport come from?
Well, like you said, Rob, I think this whole surfing lark was ingrained from a very early age. I live by the beach in Rest Bay. I started off just on one of the little polystyrene surfboards, the little floaties that we all had. We didn't stand up on it, but just lie down. And then it sort of, the seed was planted. And I just had free reign to go to the beach whenever I could. I could get up before school. I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes, surf for 2 hours, go back to bed for 2 hours, and then go to school. And then I'd come home at lunchtime, get in the water for half an hour. So you can see the sort of what was going on there. I just couldn't keep out the water. So from a very early age, I was in there just loving it. And moving on from there, I just knew that I just didn't want to do anything else. And just from the competitive scene, it sort of obviously I moved into the competitive scene. And then after that, I just that love for surfing has never left me.
Oh, yeah. Rhino grew up in, it was Kittiwake and Curlew, those two roads right behind Rest Bay. And when I was a grom, I used to look at those two roads and think, like, that is living the dream, sitting, on one of those roads, being able to go in the water all the time. So it was really nice there hearing you talk about it as wistfully as I remember those streets. I tell you what, we could start by asking about the nickname Rhino, because you really are one of those people who is known as Rhino. Like, I think it's only your wife that calls you James, isn't it? Where did it come from?
I thought you were actually going to say you're one of the only people I know who's grown into his nickname.
Yeah.
No, do you know what? It started at a fairly early age, just as I joined the comp, age 11. Had a bit of a funny period going through primary school, and I really wanted to make a bit of a mark when I joined the comprehensive. So I moved into my form class, and strangely, the person that I thought that I would pick on, as it were, was Greg Owen. And Greg was wearing these real strange pasty shoes. So I was like, look at your shoes. And it literally is as boring as that. Greg then turned around and just looked at me and went, look at your Rhino boots. And I was known as Rhino Boots right throughout
What
school.
Is a Rhino boot?
Big clompers, big, huge things, like
so
big,
it's because the shoes, the feet looked like the feet of a rhino. Is that what it is?
They were just, I think that's what it was. I don't know where I got these things from. I don't know, some cheap shop somewhere. But hey, they kept me wet. Kept me
for the benefit of the tape. Rhino is now demonstrating what a shoe looks like with his hands.
Yes,
it was
and it's stuck ever since.
Yeah, it was interesting to you mentioned a certain individual just then, because you did have a good competitive rivalry with that person, didn't you? And that was also something that was the course of some banter in the school room, in the classroom before your first ever contest, wasn't it?
That's right. It was. Like I just started surfing for fun. But
should we give him the cold gar treatment and change his name then? What should we call him? Reg Bowen?
Or can we call him?
Yeah, for the purposes of today, he's Reg Bowen.
Okay, so old Reg. So no, I was sitting in the classroom on a Friday night, and the Reg turned around to me and goes, "Hey, Rhino, are you entering this competition tomorrow?" And all the girls were there. They were listening. They were all laughing at me, thinking, "Oh, old Rhino, he's a surfer, but he's no good." And old Reg was giving it the big one. And but it was the 100% Mambo Scholastics Championships, and it was to be my first ever surfing competition. So of course I was really nervous. And I was sitting in the classroom. It was double maths on a Friday afternoon, and Reg was giving it all. And then he just turned to me with this phrase, which will stay with me forever. He actually said, "Hey, Rhino, you've got about as much chance of beating me as I have of beating Tom Curren." And of course, Tom Curren in those days was the equivalent of Kelly Slater today. So all the girls knew who Tom Curren was, and all the girls were laughing, and it was like, oh, and I was gutted. So of course, competition day came, surf was pumping, got my heat, and who do I draw? It was old Reg. It was Coney Beach. It was howling southwesterly. Yeah. So me and Reg, I got my rash vest on, all nervous, and of course, for me that was just the best. Monday morning, back into school, and I crawled across to old Reg. "Hey, Reg, how'd you get on?" But of course, I beat him over the weekend, and from that day on, I was quite accepted in school, and that's really where I think my desire and my drive for competition started. So yeah, thanks, Reg.
That's good. I had no idea you boys were the same year in school.
We've covered.
Yeah, he was in my form class.
That is so funny. So, what are the odds of that? Between you, was that 7 Welsh Open titles from one form class in a comp? Amazing.
Yeah.
That happens though, doesn't it? Because I think people kind of push each other, don't they?
Yeah. If you look at all the notable, the major winners in any given sport, quite often they'll have someone competing with them side by side. Be it, I can't think of any good examples in surfing now, but the Brownlee twins, for instance, in triathlons. Yeah. They grew up twin brothers, and they're both ripping.
I mean, just going back to that, like, it wasn't just Reg and myself. It was, Porthcawl Comp was like a hotbed of talent, and it was. There was guys like Paul Lovell, Paul Lovell was there. He was in our year, but not just those guys. There was lots of other guys who weren't competitive surfers who were really, really good.
Yeah, Damien Jones, I remember.
That's right. He was in my mind. I was thinking about him.
Moved to London, I think, didn't he? Got a job as a graphic designer or something. God, such a stylish surfer. And I was, nowadays we sort of feel a little bit, I think, as if we kind of are of the same generation. But when you were, reaching that kind of 18, 19, 20, the age gap between us felt a lot bigger, and I was a proper grom still then, and so I can really remember seeing like Rhino, Paul Lovell, Greg, Damien Jones, and all these guys having these surf offs against each other, and the first time I saw Rhino surf was at Scare on a freezing cold winter morning, and I'd just heard of this guy called Rhino, who's like the best surfer because he does 360s, and I went over to Scare with my dad. And then I saw someone goes, "That's Rhino," and he had like this like blondish mullet. It was quite like, you were quite noticeable. And Rhino did one of his 360s, and I can remember my dad kind of going, "Oh, that's a trick. It's a trick, that is." And it's kind of, and I think my dad was like obviously annoyed because he wanted his son to think that like he was the man surfing, and like obviously as you get a bit older, you realise that your dad is the man, but at the time, I think for my dad, he was kind of like, "Oh, look, my son's into like what that guy's doing," rather than my dad's like drop me cut back or something, which I would learn to appreciate down the line, obviously.
Absolutely, and still stays in my mind to this day. Yeah,
that's fun. I think I've been trying to think of my first memory of seeing Rhino surfing or noticing you surfing, and I can't think of it. You just always seem to be there. As a grom, you'd always kind of pays testament to the enthusiasm we talked about earlier. You were always in the water. Whenever I turned up at the beach, you were always in there, be it Rest or the Point or wherever. And like I say, you were kind of like the guy. We're like, oh, it's Rhino's in, or like any wave you got. We were all kind of looking over our shoulders to see what you're going to do next.
Hey, Tom, Rob, the shoes on the other foot now. I look at you like that, and I'm thinking, hey, there's that Rob Blythe. No, I think it was just, again, like I said, it was just that thing where we all did it. It was perhaps a time before, for me anyway, before the PlayStation generation came along, and it was just what we did, and we loved it, and it just carried on. So yeah.
Now, you went from school to uni, didn't you, Rhino? And graduated. So, you got a degree, and it was a vocational degree as well, wasn't it? Was it teaching?
I did a teaching degree. I did a B.Ed in a 4-year course in Swansea's Institute in Town Hill in Swansea. And yeah, no questions, no real questions why I chose Swansea there, because obviously it's close to the sea, and again, it's the lifestyle, it's the surfing. It was there for me, and that's what I did.
Picked up a student nationals title along the way. I think you did, didn't you?
I did. Yes. The biggest, that was a class competition. Like, I just can remember, and this actually happened. Like, going in for my heat, I went with my friend Tall Paul, and we drove down together because the Swansea Institute minibus was full. And my first heat, there was literally one guy was on an inflatable crocodile, and the rest were just drinking Stella. And I was like, "Am I in the wrong competition here?"
You've stolen my story there, Rhino. I got
really?
So in my first, so the 4 years I did the student nationals.
Yeah,
4. How did you manage to do it for 4?
Because I was a ringer in the 4th year. I got drafted in because I still knew all the committee. That was my best result, actually. It came down to a points, like a split, a count back in the final. I ended up getting second.
Oh no, because my best result in that is 3rd. But, so Rhino's got a 1st, you got a 2nd, and I got a 3rd.
So but technically we equal each other on the 3rd, because I wasn't actually in university when I got the 2nd. But in my first year, though, that was the year I didn't reach the final. I got knocked out in the first round. So first draw was it was pretty good. It was like solid 5 or 6 foot, but pretty windy. And they opted to move it to Towan around the corner. Yeah, and it was like howling offshore. Really small, like a foot, really inconsistent, and I actually did get knocked out by someone on a crocodile. Yeah, I'd come straight from the party though. I don't think I'd slept. But what that was such a fun competition. There's another one, and not to take over this chat with you, Rhino, but this is a funny story. So this is in the semi-final. Elliot, Dudley, and I were both in the same heat. We were both representing Cardiff University at the time, and in our heat was Josh Leatherbarrow from Jersey and a boy called Matt Lemaitre from Guernsey. And of course, Jersey and Guernsey have this massive rivalry. And coming into the last 3 or 4 minutes of the heat, I think I was in 1st, Elliot was in 3rd, something like that. And I think in order for us to win the title that year, Elliot had to make it into, this is the semis. The quarters, and then Elliot had to make it into the semis. We both had to make it to get a spot on the podium. And Matt Lemaitre was just lining up this perfect set wave. It was the one year we had it absolutely as good as it gets. Fish was really big, really clean, barely any wind. And we just saw Matt Lemaitre stroking into this bomb. And by this point, Josh Leatherbarrow from Jersey was away and gone in 4th. He had no hope. But he looked at us and went, "Don't worry, boys, I've got this." And the rivalry came out because he just faded him into oblivion and stopped him getting the score, and then Elliot picked up the wave behind and took 2nd position.
Amazing.
So funny.
Yeah. I set up the Glamorgan University team to go to that contest the first time I went to it, and there was this bloke from Pembroke who signed. I put these little flyers around the university saying, "Do you want to come to the surf club? Join the surf club and all this." And this bloke came along, and he could surf, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I've never done a competition before. I'm I'm really keen." So I was like trying to explain to him the rules and all that. He threw his vest on, he paddled out, he got himself a really good wave, did a couple of turns, and I was like, "Yes, this is brilliant. Glamorgan Uni, you're gonna place somewhere, you know." And then he paddled back out, and he just turned around and dropped in on someone. And then he did it again, and he did it again and again. And then he came in, and he was like, "I did really well then, didn't I?" No. He just didn't know the rule, the drop-in rule. But the other thing about that comp is how many people entered it, you know, and I think
the biggest, wasn't it?
Wasn't it? Is it the world's biggest entry?
It's not. It's Europe's, I think. It's absolutely massive. But
like 500 people.
I think it also holds the record for the amount of alcohol in blood systems in people in heats. It's ridiculous. Saw some funny things at those contests.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Rob Miles was on our team for my duration of my university career, and I mean, yeah, he's a fun guy
and a future guest on the show. We're hopeful. Hey, Rhino, you didn't use, well, do we say use the degree? I think it's really interesting that you didn't then go into a teaching career or explore a teaching career. You went straight the natural progression of the first grade surfer, really, you know, like to win a couple of surf contests, you know, the Billabong sponsorship from a very young age, and then you just went straight into the surf industry as a rep, didn't you? So that was
That's right. I mean,
very deliberate.
Yeah, absolutely. The choice, probably to my parents' dismay, was I came out of university out of college, and I really felt at that point was that I wasn't ready to have a serious job, one that I had to really commit to for the rest of my life, because I think that teaching is that job, and it requires 100% commitment from that person, and full respect to all teachers all around the world, because they do a fantastic job. But yeah, you're right. I think what I did, my choice as I came out, was to go, right, I'm just going to have a stopgap, and I became a postman, a part-time postman for.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was supposed to be. I was like, I'll just do it for a couple of months, and I think it became. I think I did it for about just over 2 years, and in that time, I went to the Worlds in California, and the reason being that I was still at home. I was able to surf. I had that plenty of time during the day where I could just surf when I wanted.
The post, that's one of the like prime surf jobs, isn't it? A postman.
It was.
They were all surfers then, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. When I went into the Port Call sorting office, there was probably about like a good 7, 8, 9 guys in there who surf. Sorry,
I got fairy liquid in my beer. So Rhino, how did it work out? You moving from being a postman through to rapping in the surf industry?
Well, it actually became. I think it's part of growing up. I kind of just went, you know what? I think this time is right for me to perhaps cross over into a serious job. But I still didn't want to let it go that much. So luckily, with my connections with the sponsorship with Billabong and Brad Hockridge, Brad very kindly took me on as a rep for Globe Shoes and the Realm. And it kind of started from there, really. I was on the road. My main area when I was selling was Cornwall. I was down there like most weeks. So, and of course, just it made surfing really easy and accessible. And it was good because just being around like-minded people, like the guys who I used to meet in the stores were mainly surfers. And it was just a happy-go-lucky environment to be in. And back then surf industry was pretty much booming.
I was just going to say that was like the golden age, wasn't it? Everybody was buying surf stuff, and you wandered down any high street and you'd see any given surf brand like emblazoned on somebody's chest.
Exactly. And I think it was back then, that was when it was cool to be a surfer. Everybody wanted a part of it. And you had, and the other thing I think which was quite interesting was that up the north of the UK, there wasn't that many sort of surf shops, so to speak. So the guys coming down from the north on holiday, they would see all these big surf brands, and they just wanted a part of it. And it was it was great. Things were good, and you kind of couldn't really do a thing wrong, really. It's changed now, mind.
I think when you were doing that job, Rhino, working for Glow, that's when I first kind of like got to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
And I remember like popping up the warehouse as it was back then.
Yeah.
When it was like the smaller one. I forget where it was even.
Oh.
But
yeah, I remember.
And I just remember being a scrum with my eyes were wide, just like looking around this room full of wetsuits and good paraphernalia and like all the people that I looked up to in the water, all working under one roof. That's been a good place to work.
That never ever got old. Do you know what? Walking into work every single day, and just you'd see there would be brand new wetsuits, there'd be brand new surfboards, the latest technologies. You'd have faces from abroad, like surfers from abroad coming in. You'd have, there you go, just to drop a couple of names, you know, like, well, I was working with the guys from Dirty Sanchez, and you know that I was working with those guys when Dirty Sanchez took off. So it was a really, really interesting and fun time to be involved in the industry, for sure.
Yeah, that used to blow my mind as well when I'd go in there. And I remember those Dirty Sanchez boys, Pritchard and Dainton. I think Pancho was in the warehouse, wasn't he? And I remember one time they were opening, one of them had a new signature model skateboard, just the deck. And unfortunately, we've told Apple Podcast that we can't swear, so we can't swear. But he opened the box and he started like going F.K, shouting really loud, you know, like that word, you know, shouting this word over and over again. And I was going, what's wrong? And he pulled the first of his signature deck out, and that was what was written on it. It was just a blackboard with that written on it in white. And another time as well, I'd hurt my eye really badly in super tubes, fin through the eye and stitches and everything. And Pritchard was in one day, and I was coming by for some reason. Oh, what happened to your eye? And I said, oh, well, the thing is, see, I got into a bit of a scrap the other night on a night out, and I took down 5 bouncers, but the 5th one got me on the way out the door, like just fooling around. And Pritchard goes, I thought I heard about that, yeah, and then just walked off. I was like, in their world, that's not a silly story.
No.
That is funny.
They've grown up now, haven't they?
They certainly have, and they've gone the other. Do you know what? Interestingly, I mean, just to carry on that story a little bit, working with them both it was like night and day. Like they were like Pritchard was a personality on the TV that I saw, and I didn't see that in the office. He was a completely different person. He was very quiet, very shy, retiring, great cook, a bit of a prankster. Same with Dayton, really. But yeah, really good blokes, pair of them, really good lads.
And then one day, Brad summons you to the office, and you think you're in trouble.
I was always in trouble with Brad. He's always shouting at me, so it wasn't anything unusual. But this one particular time, he called me in and he was like, "Rhino, get in this office now!" And I was like, "Oh no, what have I done now? I'm surely what?" And of course, so he says, "Sit down there." So I'm sitting in the office. You know, it's like one of those one of those meetings without coffee. You know, it's not a pleasurable meeting. I'm thinking, I'm really in trouble here. And he's like, "Have you booked appointments for next week?" And I was like, Yeah, of course I have. And he's like, "Right, well, you need to cancel them." And I was like, "Oh God, being fired. I'm being fired." And he's like, "Have you got a passport?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Right, what I need you to do, you've got a couple of you've got your quiver of surfboards." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Right, good." Because right, what I need you to do next Tuesday, I need you to drive to Heathrow Airport. And then I'm just gonna give you a couple of tickets here. And he just passed over the desk these tickets with Singapore Airlines. I was like, "What is this?" Flying to Java and then to the Mentawai Islands for a carve photo shoot to the Mentawais. Like I nearly fell through the floor. I couldn't believe it. Like I'd never been to Indo before. I'd barely been anywhere else before. But like Indo was my dream. I just really wanted to go there. And of course, it was one of those things. Like I was like, "But I can't afford it. I'm going. You know." He said, "No, just go. It's all sorted. It's all paid for. You're going." And it happened. And it was one of the raddest things that's ever happened.
It's the stuff of dreams, isn't it?
Do you know what? To be fair, I was really lucky. I was very lucky. But Brad really, for as well as employing me, he sort of put me on quite a few trips. like around the world, which was amazing, all paid for, and it was fantastic. It was dreamy.
And that was when the Mentawais was really, like a growing surf destination, like as in not the surf destination it is now, where you can go and stay in a resort at Macaroni's. This was the boat you guys, sort of empty lineups at some of those spots back then.
That's right. Yeah. We turned up. I think I can't remember the exact time in, but I think it was around about 25. That's just under 25 years ago, something like that. I might be wrong, but it was between 20 and 25 years ago. And I can remember, I never forget it. Just opening the boat. I was sleeping, down below, and I sort of pulled the curtain across of the porthole, looking out, and it was like as if I was watching a surf movie. Like just
you
seeing
were in sick joy.
Yeah. It was just incredible, and there honestly pulling like into Macaroni's, and there was no one in, and paddling out there, and I don't think I ever took it for granted, but like we were there. I think Alan Stokes was on the trip, Guts was on the trip, Danny Ward, the bodyboarder, was on the trip, Craig Farnsworth was there, Sam Bleakley, great guy. We had a fabulous trip. Really, not absolutely class Mentawais, but because it was my first trip, and I think it was most of the boys' first trip as well. We had a blast. We had an absolute blast, and it was just like you say, just what dreams are made of.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rhino, not quite the Mentawais, but I certainly had a good time nonetheless. On another trip, thanks to Brad, we went to Ireland back. It doesn't seem that long ago. It's probably about 15 years ago now. But we scored, and I don't know if you remember. This was kind of like I think it's the first trip I'd been on with you all, and I had my clothes stolen by a disgruntled Simon Tucker.
And I think, in fact, I've just remembered, you've still got my dressing gown because I lent you my dressing gown.
Yeah, and this is testament to Rhino's character. So the one of the 3 groms on the trip, and Brad had like kind of coaxed me into taking a picture of Simon whilst he was going to the toilet, and Simon didn't take very kindly to it, and so stole my clothes, and I was naked for the trip home to the ferry. And they, as I later found out, they were stashed in the footwell of this Chrysler Voyager that had all these different nooks and crannies.
That's right.
But rather than leave me a grom naked, Rhino, of course, donated his dressing gown to me. So I turned up at the ferry port with Rhino's dressing gown on to come home.
And I'm quite big into dressing gowns, I'll have you know. As you can see, I'm in mine right now. And I've got another 3 lined up over there, so I wouldn't mind that one back. Thanks.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. I'll wash it and return it to you.
The island, along with the Canaries in Scotland, were represented a early place for you to sort of get experienced in gnarly surf, Rhines.
It was.
Where was the first really heavy surf that you can ever remember going out in?
Well, I think the first couple of trips we did with Welsh Coast Surf Club were kind of pretty boozy, and there wasn't a lot of surfing done, but it was a great laugh. But of course, I got a taste for it, and I got to know the sort of the Sligo area and up at Bundoran and that. But the one real trip which sort of stuck in my mind, I mean, it wasn't really... I kind of just obviously listening to your first podcast and talk about like nightmare trips and that. It was kind of the one which sticks in my mind where it was a bit of a nightmare. It started off the 6-hour ride across, the 6-hour ride across Ireland after being on the boat from Swansea to Cork for 12 hours in a storm, and we eventually get to Doolin Pier, and across the wave from Doolin Pier is a long paddle is a wave called Crab Island, and
right-hander. That's
right. Fabulous, absolutely incredible, scenic looking wave. And we did a trip with Carv Mag. Chris Power came. I think Steve came as well. And we paddle across. It's that typical thing, when you go surfing and you're like, you're just throwing everything everywhere out of the car. Just can't get your wetsuit on quick enough, and paddle across. and we've only been there like 20 minutes. I paddle across, I paddle into like the set wave comes in. It just stands up, absolutely stands up. I mean, it's solid. It's just, so, I don't know how big it was. It was way overhead. But it just I sort of tried to come out the front, and the lip came down, landed square on my shoulder, and I could just remember like hideous pain, being underwater, thinking, that didn't feel so good. Anyway, I sort of come to the surface, and it's like Crab Island is out to sea, and it's like these big boulders, and I got washed in amongst all the boulders above my head. I'm thinking, oh, this definitely isn't good, because I couldn't actually get myself out of the water because one of my arms wasn't working. But anyway, I eventually got around the island in the rip and managed to scramble up on top of the island. And I can remember looking out and just seeing the most perfect barreling waves, being utterly broken in every sense of the word, that knowing that I was going to have to go home. And I'd only been there 20 minutes.
No.
But then, so I was in a predicament then. So I'm on this island out at sea. It's only probably, I don't know, like a football pitch size island. And I'm on the island thinking, well, I'm going to have to paddle back now with one arm. So I sort of like look out, and I can see a boat paddling, sort of puffing out, thinking, oh, well, there you go. He's come to get me. So I waved to him, waving with my good arm. He just waved past and sort of chugged off. It goes out into the distance. And I'm like, okay. So there you go. And that was it, really. And that was the end of my trip. That really was the end of my trip to Ireland. It literally was one wave. And then I managed to get home on the plane, and like within a couple of hours, and that was me out the water for another 6 months. So
nice. Talking of, so Tom, just before that, you talked about Ireland there, Rhino. Tom mentioned about the Canary Islands, and when a couple of years, well, again, it's not a couple of years ago, it's a long time, it's probably like 18 years ago now, just shy of that maybe. Tom and I did a reissue of Welsh Coast Surf Club's old magazine lineup, and in our first, we did three issues, I think, and in the first one, we ran a photo of you on the cover, and it was, I think that was from a round trip to the Canaries. I think it was at the Bubble.
All right.
And it's again, that's one of the photos I kind of like remember from Grommethood, of seeing you just like falling out of the lip into this right hand pit. I'm sure you know the photo I'm on about. I
think I probably do know it. Yeah.
And it's that was you had somewhat of an affinity, didn't you, with that northern track in Fuerteventura?
I did. It was one of those things which I was always aware of as a young kid, because Giles and the older than me, older guys would go in there quite regularly.
So this is the shaper Giles Davis that you're talking about there.
That's right, from Heavy Session Surfboards. He was the original founder. And Giles used to come back with these stories of big waves and surfing, and I was like, size of lampposts and stuff like that. And I was like, what? I want a bit of this. I really want a bit of this. But I just couldn't get there, It was when, I was young, and it was just, and in the end, I was like, I've got to go. And I can remember my first ever trip was with Gary Lewis and Paul Lovell. And I remember being in the bubble and Gary saying that the waves travel fast. And when you paddle into them, you've really got to dig in. And I vividly remember my first wave as it came towards me, as I turned to paddle for it. I couldn't believe the thickness and how fast it was going. I actually pulled back and I went, Gary, you go. I couldn't. It was just incredible. But obviously, after a while, I sort of got used to it. And over like quite a number of trips, many winters in the Canaries and Fuerteventura, we ended up scoring some solid waves in Acid Drop, Mechiones. I mean, I'm not talking waves like Mullaghmore, or I'm not claiming to be a massive big wave surfer. But at the time, for me and like a lot of the boys, we were like, it was quite big for us, So, but that's what I enjoyed doing, and that's where my enjoyment of bigger waves come from, I'm not saying I'm a big wave surfer, but I just like it a bit bigger.
Well, I can attest to Rhino's attitude to gnarly waves myself, because you probably remember when I think I was 20, and you and Jeremy Evans, a colleague of yours at the Realm, picked me up at 6 o'clock. You phoned me and you said, we're on our way to your house. We're going to Thurso now. Are you in?
Yes.
And so 15 minutes after the phone call, I was on my way to Thurso with you guys, and there was a swell. We went up there, and it was pretty chunky Thurso. And I remember being really nervous on the way up, thinking like, oh no, if it's going to be barreling now. And like this time, it's not some random Aussie who's going to see if I can surf these kind of waves. It's the boys from home. They're going to tell other people how I do. We got up there, and this, of course, I'm going to ask you about guns in a minute, actually, because this was back when we had the attitude that you had to ride guns in big surf, and I think nowadays that seems to be a thing that people seem to have sort of almost, it's like the 4-minute mile. People have kind of broken that mental barrier and use smaller boards in bigger surf now. But I remember having a 6.2 DHD, bricking it. We went in the water, and you took a 6.6 JP in, and about halfway through the session, Rhino goes, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit undergunned on this thing. I'm going to go in and get my 6.10. Do you want to use my 6.6 instead?" And I was like, yes, please. So Rhino goes, "Right, swap leashes. I'll take your 6.2 in." So I've been finding this Thurso quite, challenging. And then Ryan's paddles for this full bomb set on my 6.2 DHD, kind of like free falls to the bottom of it. And I remember looking over the ledge of it and just kind of seeing the board do like skateboard wobbles as he does this big bottom turn on it, and then he just kind of squares up, the barrel comes over him, and I remember seeing your hair sort of go and stand up on its ends like you'd been electrocuted or something as like the wave breathed, and then you didn't make it, but you did the gung ho attitude to that wave, and I remember thinking, oh gosh, this is totally surfable on it. I got this 6.6 now, I've got to go for it. Do you remember that trip?
I do clearly. I think I actually remember that wave. Actually, because I remember the vision of like that actual set, and it because as you know, like Thurso is just dreamlike, isn't it? And that was a mega session.
It was.
Can
incredible.
I just say that one of the things which sticks out in my mind, I can remember.
I know what you're going to say.
I know what you're going to say. I remember. I can still remember. It's brilliant. Like paddling back out, I got the gun and I'm sort of like stroking out. It's got loads of float on it, so I'm just sort of like, and I can see Tom paddling into this absolute bomb. I'm like, yes, just go. You gotta go. And he just drops into it, and fair play. You just like in this absolute steaming barrel. And like you sort of crouching, and I'm thinking, well, okay, he's going in. He's and it stayed open. And you thought you'd come out the barrel, but
I did.
Kind of like celebrated so early.
I threw a double shaka with each hand at you and Jem.
And it was just you just got guillotined. Like you put your head up above the parapet, and it was like that Wilbur Cookmere thing where you just see your feet go up and over like a full scorpion. It was like amazing, and I just remember it. Brilliant.
And from land, it's the worst possible not make, because what the view from land would be me pulling into the barrel, and then just as I've done all the work and made it, clipped by the head, flying backwards, board exits the barrel and makes its way safely out onto the shoulder.
Skillful barrel avoidance.
But there's nothing finer than seeing one of your mates just get absolutely drilled, is there, by like a big set wave? It's so funny.
I begged Rhino and Jem for the rest of that trip to let me count that wave as a barrel, and they were like, nope, that's the whole point. It's a high rolling game, it's high stakes. You did not make it. You were 1 inch away from the boys going home and telling everyone that you got barreled, but you didn't get barreled because you didn't make it.
That's it. And I think I fall on the side of Rhino and Jem here. That's not a mate, Tom, by the sounds of it. It sounds like you got guillotined and ended up as a scorpion before you made the barrel. But one thing I'd like to mention, so Rhino, your reputation precedes you in the barrel riding kind of stakes, and not only obviously on your front side at Thurso, but you're well known as a backside tube rider, as a competent backside tube rider. Where did that come from?
Joe, I feel a bit more comfortable on my backside than I do on my front side, but that came from, again, just a local break in town, which was, I wouldn't call it a slab, it's pretty shallow. I don't know whether we'd surf it if the water was less murky, because I think it is actually quite shallow. But we'd surf it in again at lunchtime. It only doesn't work for very long, it's just an hour, but it can barrel. It's a left, obviously. But I just would go in there, and I loved it. Super short takeoff, very small takeoff area. It's a quick little barrel. Old Reg would always be in there with me. Always tell me I was sitting in the wrong place. But I, it would, for some reason, it would just stay open. I think, I don't know. It was one of those waves that would always stay open. In fact, I went there about just before this COVID thing with Logan, Logan Nickel, and he'd never surfed it before, and he's like, "What's this place like? What's this place?" And he's a frother anyway, isn't he? His old Logan.
Yeah.
But he came out. He's like, "I gotta come. You gotta take." But it's so fickle, the tides, everything. But so yeah, it was in town in Porthcawl, and that's where that was my go-to spot.
I think that does tell us a little bit about your attitude as well there, though, Rhines, because I've tried to learn to backhand tube ride there, and obviously with a bit less skill than you, but I just have been thrown face first into that reef a million times trying to learn, because I find it a really tight, difficult backhand tube, and I do find that really interesting that you cite a difficult wave as the place you learned to do it, because a lot of people would say that they learned to tube ride in a more accessible tube and something like that. You don't mind falling off?
No. Well, don't forget, I'm a big guy, and I need a wave with a bit more power to get me going, So, but yeah, it's okay. I don't think. In fact, I did actually dislocate my other shoulder in this spot not long after the island trip. So, yeah. So people do hurt themselves there. And in fact, a bodyboarder broke his neck there about 6-7 years ago, didn't he? He's okay now, but it's vertebrae or something. But
I remember Julian Gardner dislocating his shoulder in there as well, and the surf was pumping, and he was on the prom trying to ram his shoulder back in. He was running against the wall, trying to slam it back in so that he could go in again, and he couldn't.
Oh God, yeah.
Can we go back to that topic of guns? Because you do still like to add a bit of length to a board when you go on a trip and the surf's going to be good, don't you? And you gave me this idea and of using the gun like in rubbish surf at home before you go on a trip, and I actually did that when you advised me to do it, and I couldn't believe that I didn't always do it, because we get these boards shaped, like a 6.6 round pin or whatever it is, to surf waves that are so that we don't come across very often. And then we go and surf those waves abroad on a board that we don't know. And I remember you saying to me, like, well, just, take that board in like 2-foot slop at home, so at least you know the way it works. And you stand by that idea, don't you? I think very recently I've surfed the point with you and you were on a 6.7 or something like that because you were going to take it on a trip.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's just it's that thing. You just got to have a little practice, don't you? And be familiar, get it under your arm, feel the weight of it, and then if you can get it in the water, it doesn't even matter if it's 2 foot or if even it's a bit bigger at your home break. Just as long as you know how it paddles, that you're comfortable with it. I think the board you talked just before Christmas, Johnny Purton, JP Surfboards, got me shaped me a 7.6, which my intention is to take it away to Indo whenever we can get there. But I've been riding it just before over Christmas and before this, and it's it's just a lot of fun. I'm at a point in my surfing life where I'm just doing it for the love and the enjoyment, and I can paddle out on a big long board like a 7.6 gun when it's a bit bigger, when it's maybe 6 foot or 5-6 foot, and just a big carve or a big bottom turn feels amazing on these things, So I just bigger boards for me just suited me down to the ground. I was a bigger guy anyway, so it didn't really make a lot of difference.
Now, the other thing that we have to ask you about was going back through time a bit now again. You chaperoned or surf tripped with, whatever, I don't know what's the wording for it. You did a 10-day surf trip through France, Wales and England with Tom Curren.
I did.
How did that come about and what was that like?
Again, it was down to Brad Hockridge. We were sponsoring Tom Curren with the brand that we did called The Realm. And Tom was a great ambassador for the brand. So, of course, with him and his close affinity to France, living there and partly in Panama, we sort of just jumped on that opportunity to get him to visit some of our customers down in France and then bring him back to the UK and take him around the UK, like you said, through Wales and England, through the Realm customers down there. Yeah, what an opportunity it was. Very surreal, to be honest, to be given that opportunity. I don't know where you want me to start.
I know. Well, I've been kind of relayed this story secondhand through Mark Schofield, who was, of course, working with you at the time, and it was on that trip.
Yeah.
I think it was like in northern Spain or somewhere, and a shop owner that you were visiting with, Tom Curren, had been to Hawaii at some point and taken like a 12 photo sequence of Tom Curren at Pipeline. And Tom Curren is of course notoriously quite shy and quite retiring. And so you're in this shop and trying to promote the brand, and the shop owner had so many questions for Tom, and he was saying very little. So Scoff's there trying to prompt him to kind of engage with the shop owner, and he was like, "Oh wow, this photo sequence is amazing. That must have been one of the best waves of your life. You know, that how did it feel?" And Tom Curren, all he could muster was, "Yeah, it was kind of cool."
And you know what? That voice is Tom Curren all over. I don't know, like, I'm not a very good how to describe people, but he is very unassuming. He's shy, very retiring. Just definitely is not into the limelight at all. And like, hey, I was with him for 10 days. I can't claim to know him really well, but from what I remember and what I experienced with him was just the most amazing experience. They say that, you know, you're not. Do they advise you? What's the term? You're not.
It's never meet your heroes, isn't it?
Yeah, never meet your heroes. So, like, at that particular point, like, Tom's surfing was like the pinnacle. That's where I'd want to be. But I didn't know him as a person, so that was all new to me. But like, his surfing obviously didn't disappoint. Like, we surfed together. We surfed all over the place, which was incredible. You know, just being with Tom in the water, and like, he'd be like, "Hey, Rhino, you go for this one. Hey, you know," and that's pretty cool.
Of course.
But as a person, yeah, wow. Like, this trip happened. I think it was when I first had my first ever mobile phone. Like, phones didn't really ring that much back then, and I think to this day, my phone has never ever rang as much as it did when I spent time with Tom Curren. People I didn't even know were just ringing me up like, "Hey, Rhino, do you mind if I just come round? I wouldn't mind a jam on the." And Tom's like going, "No, I'm just gonna chill tonight." And that's exactly what he was like. Do you know what I mean? He'd be like, we'd just have a beer in the night. But then the one, not on a surfing thing, but there was this one time, and I was on. There was not just me; it was Jem Evans, who was also working for the Realm at the time, a good friend of mine, and we'd been out surfing all day. And of course, we come back, have a couple of beers, and it's bedtime, and we're going to bed, and Tom is jamming on his guitar in my bedroom. And I'm like, "Oh, Tom, can you give her I'm tired." And Jem,
surreal.
Yeah, and Jem,
Tom, man, turn it off.
Yeah, so Jem comes in and goes, Rhino, you can't go to sleep. This is gonna you just can't go to sleep. And I was like, "Oh, okay," and I was a bit like cheesed off. Anyway, I can remember looking up and like, because obviously the light was off, and and it sounds so cheesy, but I was looking out and I can see a silhouette of Tom playing the guitar and with a full moon behind him. But not only that, he made up a song about me. But the song was called Rhino the Whale, and I don't know, like, so it was like, yeah, it was just bizarre, and it was just one of those things which stayed with me. And that was Tom all over, really. You know,
so funny.
Yeah, and he was just happy when he was playing his guitar. You know, he just seemed that.
I've got the funniest image of this person that you kind of like idolized all your life, and then all of a sudden he's sitting at the end of your bed singing a song about you, and you tell him, "Just shut up, man.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get to sleep. What are you doing?"
That's exactly what it was. And but like Jem said, he said, "You know, you need to suck this in and put it in your memory bank because you'll remember it.
Live in the moment."
Absolutely. And
I just want to get to sleep. I've got to go surfing in the morning. What are you doing?
Yeah.
That's funny. Just moving on slightly, Rhino. You recently, of course, well, I say recently, in the past year or so, we've seen the wave in Bristol open up, and I've seen some footage and photos of you there.
Yeah.
But before that, when in Snowdonia in North Wales, the first kind of commercial wave pool in the UK opened. You're at the opening of that as well. What's your take on the whole wave pool scene?
I'm into it big time. I loved it. I like even before Snowdonia had opened, I'd gone to Dubai and I'd surfed the Wadi in Dubai.
Oh yeah.
So by the time like Snowdonia was open, I was just amping to get on it. To me, it doesn't. It's just a different form of surfing. It is what it is.
It's interesting you say that, because I've been on the wave. I booked into surf the Snowdonia one, but it broke down the week I was due to go. But I've since surfed the Bristol one. And speaking to people who haven't yet been there, I say it's not surfing. It's something. It's like another sport, but it complements it rather than detracts from it. It'll never replace it, but it's something to do alongside it.
100%. I think for me, the one thing, I'm sure you've heard it said before. I mean, to me, it was the first thing I remember about Snowdonia was the repetition of the wave, that you're pretty much just doing that same turn. And that's the great thing about it, is that you can send the grommets there, the Welsh team, the British team, whatever, and they can perfect those maneuvers over and over and over. And that's why I love Snowdonia. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was really good. Apart from it's the training facility, but fitness-wise, I mean, crikey, I think I had a 3-hour session there, and I think I had something like 50 waves or something. I was broken. It took me like a week to recover, but yeah, really good, really, really good.
I spoke to Mark Vaughan about this after the day after I'd been to the Bristol one, and stupidly I only booked an hour. I wanted to get a second hour in afterwards, but I was knackered. I surfed for an hour, and I was with quite a few people that obviously didn't surf that often, just based on the kind of paddle fitness, because I was getting 2 waves every set, and by the end of it, I'd had like maybe 25 waves in the hour, just shy of that, and I was beat. I was done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that
really saps it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. And if you're not fit, if you paddle fit anyway, like you're going to start missing, like you said, those set waves which are coming through. But the thing is, you want to maximize your money, don't you? You want to get as many waves as you can for your money.
It's at the forefront, yeah.
Yeah. So the pressure's on when you on that takeoff spot, isn't it? You're like, don't want to mess this one up.
That's it. Yeah.
That place is only down the road, Rhines, but you have of late, the last couple of years, fallen completely in love with the island of Bali, haven't you? And that has been somewhere that you have returned to time and time again. What is it about Bali that captures your imagination so much?
It's that, like, for me, as I'm getting older, I've got a family now, I'm married. It's not all about me. I'd love to go to the Mentawis if I could, every year, but it's just not going to work. The kids aren't going to stay on an island. They need a bit of, something to do. So if my wife needs, she needs something to do as well. So, and Bali ticks all those boxes. It's an awesome place. It really is. The only regret about Bali that I have is that I didn't go there like 20 years ago. But saying that, like, the spot which I really enjoy surfing in Bali is a wave called Impossibles. It's a long left-hander. It can get really big, really solid, and it's even good when it's small as well. But like you said, I think one of the things is that, like, I go in peak season, pretty much the time when I go. I've been going in August, and it's just this thing, you almost don't have to check the surf. You just put your boardies on, and you just go down the beach, and it's pumping, no matter what time you go there. So yeah, it gets in, like, for me, Indonesia and Asia in particular as well is just an amazing place to be. I just, the food, the people, the surf is off the chain. It's great for me at this stage of my life.
And you're a fan of Bingin as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, Bingin is where I stay. Like, you just, first of all, it was just by chance, actually, to be fair, while we went there. It was through recommendations of other people. So we thought, okay, we'll give it a try. And you just got to go down there, and you realize when you go there that, it's people always, it's funny, people ask me this question, but was it crowded? I always think, do you know what? It kind of was crowded, but the thing is, like, we surf Rest Bay, and like on a Saturday or a Sunday, there can be 300 guys in Rest Bay. And I think I just end up getting used to surfing in crowds. So I don't find it that bad there, in terms of crowds. But so that's why I just, everything about it just works.
I I have a love for Bingin as well, Rhino, and that stretch of coast up on the Phuket Peninsula. And it must have been, it was two winters ago now. I was there for the wet season.
I
And
remember.
it was the year my mum retired, and as a kind of like celebration of her 2-year long teaching career, my sister had booked this really fancy pad at Bingin, and it was like one of this apartment that you kind of see in home magazines. It was insane, like infinity pool to the balcony.
Yeah.
It was like, I can't ever imagine affording to stay in a place like that again. But so I was thankful for my sister taking the mantle on that one.
I think that was. Sorry, I was just going to say that was the other thing for me, is that, like, as a kid, just going off a bit here, like, everybody would go down to France and Spain when we were younger because it was so cheap to go there. And Indonesia was always this dream, like, it was so not accessible place to get to.
Unobtainable, yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, now you go there and it's, you know, it's so well priced. Everything is, to stay overnight is, you know, you can get amazing places to stay for really, really well priced, good prices, you know?
So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been to Bali quite a few times, and again, you kind of always live above your normal means because everything's so affordable.
Absolutely.
This place was spectacular. It was next level, but the whole, so much so that we of the 2 weeks we were there, we were only booked in for a small portion of it because we were kind of moving around.
Right.
But as soon as we moved into this apartment, I came down with this illness. I don't know what it was. I was just violently ill for the duration of our stay there. Just fever. One second I was boiling hot, the next second I was freezing cold, which of course,
the Bali belly they call it, don't they?
But it was beyond Bali belly. It was
really?
Honestly, it was beyond. I couldn't do anything. I just slept. I tried my best to sleep while sweating and being boiling hot, vomiting, goodness knows what. But the surf was so good, even during the wet season, that I surfed nonetheless. And that didn't help matters. I got sunstroke and goodness knows what. But I had a fantastic trip. However, that kind of, whilst I was suffering on the mattress there in that beautiful apartment, looking over pumping waves in Bingin, that was somewhat of a bad surf trip at that particular moment. And that leads us very, very nicely into our regular feature, the worst surf trips ever. And it continues to be a feature that our listeners love writing to us about, so much so that we promised we're going to do a whole show on surf trip nightmares before the summer is fully underway. And today's trip nightmare comes from friend of the show, Ridian Lewis. And for those of you that don't know him, Rid was, in a previous life, a highly decorated bodyboarder. However, he has successfully made the code change to surfing and is a common fixture in the lineups of South Wales and beyond. With his successful transition in mind, we're going to allow Rid to spin us a yarn from another cousin of the surf trip, the snow trip. Yes, indeed, this, despite not quite falling within our parameters, made us laugh enough to give it a hall pass of sorts. And so I'll begin. So this, of course, is an email that Ridian sent us this week. I'm not sure if this is allowed, but I wondered if you wouldn't mind allowing my snowboarding trip into your series of disastrous surf trips. The year was 2005, and at the time, my good friend and ex-flatmate Matt Hapgood from Puthcall had managed to blag himself a job parking cars in a posh hotel in the French Alps. Never one to pass over the opportunity of a cheap ski trip, I sent him a single text, got his address, and replied with my date of arrival. In those days, I was living up in Scotland, so my trip involved flying from Edinburgh to London, then London to Barcelona, then getting a train from Barcelona to Grenoble, and then taking a 4-hour chicken bus to my final destination of Alpe d'Huez. This nearly 30 hours door to door. Once I arrived, I met Matt and his new friends and went out for a beer. I was feeling a bit tired after my long journey and was keen to hit the slopes early the next morning. I also had a bit of a sore throat. Matt informed me that he had arranged some accommodation for me, sharing an apartment with an Irish lad who was after some rent money. This apartment turned out to be a single, filthy room. The toilet had blocked and flooded the place a few weeks previously, and the carpet stunk of excrement. The duvet and pillow had been used for the whole season without covers and were both brown and mouldy. But hey, I was a hardened Welsh surfer, and such trivialities were no problem for me, so I quickly settled down for some shut-eye, looking forward to the next day's boarding. It was then that my problems began. By the morning, my sore throat had turned into the worst bout of the flu that I had ever had. I had a 40-degree fever, was confused and babbling, could barely stand to even, again, for the benefit of iTunes, urinate. Moreover, my new flatmate seemed to think it was all rather amusing and promptly moved into his girlfriend's place, leaving me on my own with no food, books, TV, or medicine. I laughed reading this, it's funny. So to summarize, I spent the next 7 days alone, lying in a filthy bed, either crying, sleeping, or crying in my sleep. Crying, sleeping, or crying in my sleep. After 4 days, I did manage to crawl up the street to buy some bread to eat. It's such a sorry state. I also staggered into the pharmacy, where I met a lovely-looking but entirely unsympathetic pharmacist who looked at me with contempt, gave me that classic French shrug, and handed me some paracetamol. By day 7, I was a broken man. I had not touched the snow. I could barely stand up and somehow had to find my way back to Barcelona for my 2 flights home. The final insult awaited me when I finally got back to my flat in Edinburgh. Laughing unsympathetically, my girlfriend Fiona told me that she had the same illness just after I had left and had felt fine after just 24 hours. Ever since then, she has basically accused me of making the whole thing up. I have not returned to Alpe d'Huez. And that, of course, from our friend Rid. Rhino, have you got any shockers like that? That one made me laugh. It's just the picture that Rid painted of the excrement on the carpet and the moldy mattress, and not even touching the snow. 30 hours of travel to be sick in an Irishman's apartment for a week, and then returning home 30 hours to Edinburgh. Anything along those lines?
Do you know what? Nothing as dire as that. I've always been pretty lucky, really, when it comes to surf trips. Pretty much, like I said, like I mentioned that island trip earlier. That was probably as bad as it got. But you know, I've like I said, I went to Morocco. I had it flat for 2 weeks. You know, and what else do you do? But you know, I opened a few beers, and that's about it. But actually, on the way to Bali last year, a bomb went off outside our hotel, one in Bangkok, which is kind of troublesome and pretty worrying.
I'd say.
Yeah.
So you have good luck on surf trips where you've dislocated your shoulder and been involved in a bombing.
Yeah. And in fact, and the year before we were coming back out of Denpasar, flying back to Dubai, and we had a fire on the airplane, which was pretty bad as well.
I'd say that this demonstrates again to the listener a kind of a facet of Rhino's personality is that he's rather laid back in that despite having a dislocation, being involved in a terrorist incident, and a fire on board a moving plane, he's not had any problems on surf trips.
No, but I tell you what the cool one was. When we were in Bali last year, we had I think we had about 4 or 5 earthquakes as well, which was a new one for me. But that was really interesting, good fun. But yeah, no, nothing as bad as Reds. I got to be honest, nothing as bad as Reds.
Well, thanks for that, Ryans. We've more than undone the joys of our Bali chat, and from our listeners, yes, please do keep them coming. The email is castcrest@gmail.com, and you can also send us ideas through Instagram, especially if you have pictures.
Yeah, we're still working on who the talent will be to go through them all with us in this sort of single Surf Trip Nightmares episode that we're going to put together. But we have spoken to somebody's agent, haven't we, as far as talent goes there. We're in negotiations. We do have an idea. Somebody who themselves has recently come back from a terrible stroke of fortune on a surf trip. Perhaps we'll have to set up some sort of like bad trip awards thing. And Rhino, thanks for your multitudinous contributions to terrible surf trips, even though you think you'd never had one. It's good to know it's not all fun. Yes. Who misses surf trips? Not us. So, Rhino, thank you very much for coming on Crest. It's been great fun. Just a pleasure. Thank you so much. If you've enjoyed, listeners, please share your thoughts with us, with others, with the world.
Indeed. And remember, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, YouTube, or through Apple Podcasts. And then the next episode of Crest will come straight to your pocket, where it belongs. As for that next episode, well, we're going to be talking to 6-time Welsh champion Emily Williams despite being modest in years, Emily has managed to acquire quite the collection of silverware, and judging by her recent social media posts, quite the collection of surfboards too. We'll be chatting to her about surfing, travel, and her recent successes in the world of competitive exercise, aka the triathlon. We can't wait. So until the next installment of Crest, thank you for your time. Have a good week, and we'll see you soon.
Hwyl fawr.